push to encourage more state schools in England to become self-governing academies. And Nicky Morgan is with me now. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Now, I suppose the underlying question about this whole government, we haven't really heard from David Cameron himself yet, is this going to be a really radical reforming government, or is it going to be a sort of slightly one nation, more centrist kind of government? We don't know that, but education is one of the things that we're looking to. So can I ask you, first of all, Michael Gove was seen by a lot of people as one of the great revolutionary figures in the first coalition government, and then there was probably the Liberal Democrats and so forth, and he was moved to one side and you came in. Are you going to carry on the revolution now that you are untrammelled? You have a Tory majority.
Well, let me say that the first thing I think you can be sure of with the Conservative majority government is that we're going to focus on three things. The first is governing for the benefit of working people. The second is governing with compassion and with a mind of social justice. And then the third is obviously governing for the whole country. Now, why have I said that in the context of education? Because if people want because if people want a revolution, what I am going to be revolutionary about in terms of being Education Secretary is about making sure that every child has the chance to fulfil their potential. That means every child has an excellent school to attend with great teachers. That means that is the argument for social justice, being on the side of those who don't yet have the opportunity to go to good and outstanding schools. And
okay. Do you believe that, all things being equal, an academy is a better kind of school than a local authority controlled school?
I do. I think that we can see in the results that actually students do better in academies, both at the Key Stage 2, that's the end of primary school, and also in GCSEs. And let me tell you the other reason why I think it's
schools.
Well, the other reason I think that they are fantastic schools, and that's behind part of the announcement today and what's going to be in the education bill, is about giving power to heads and teachers in terms of running their school and showing great leadership. We have some fantastic heads and teachers around the country. We have some fantastic schools. But I'm very conscious of my first 9 months as Education Secretary. What I found was they are not yet everywhere. We have 1 million more children in schools rated good or outstanding than we had in 2010, but we have children who don't yet have that opportunity.
So this bill is going to, in effect, allow you to move in quite fast on schools you call coasting schools and impose academy status on them if they don't change.
Well, there are two types of schools we'll be focusing on in this bill. The first is those that are failing. That means that they are in special measures and they do need swift intervention. And that'll be the first set of powers that we will be looking at. But the second, as you say, is what's been dubbed as coasting schools. Those are schools where students are not yet making the progress that they should be making based on the attainment that they have shown so far. And there may be some fantastic, again, teachers and heads working.
What's actually going to happen? You're going to have inspectors looking at those schools saying, we regard you as a coasting school, you have to do this, this and this, and if you don't do it, we're going to make you an academy.
Well, of course, we already have Ofsted who inspect schools and they will grade them. And what we saw in the last Parliament was they changed the satisfactory rating to requires improvement. And exactly as you say, we will look and see at the schools whether it is that they are in the requires improvement category, but it is also about progress. We're introducing a new measure in secondary schools, looking at the progress that students will make over the course of their time there. Why is it that in some schools students are reaching their full potential and in other schools they're not? Now, it may be down to leadership, and we want to give, let me just make this point because I think it is important. I think given some of the coverage and people watching this programme, I want to be very clear. Where heads show that they absolutely have the capacity to improve, they have a plan, they're working with their governors, we want to give them time to do that. But where it is clear that a school does not have the capacity or the plan to get themselves out of, requires improvement, or be helping their students to fulfil their potential, to make their progress, then yes, we will intervene. We will intervene, we will put in support. There are national leaders of education, and of course we will look at the academy model too.
Now, even if every single coasting school became an academy, still well over half the schools in England and Wales would be run by LEAs. Now, given that you think academies are a better model for school, by the time you have finished as Education Secretary, would you like to see the end of LEAs, every single state school in Britain self-governing academy?
Well, I'd be very clear. I'm not going to set targets, but I would like to see. Well, I would like to see many more academies. We have made a pledge in the manifesto to have many more free schools as well. And I go back to the point. Why are we doing this?
A majority, at least, of schools?
Well, we already have a majority of secondary schools who are academies.
But
we
overall,
actually have fewer primary. Well, I would like to see, because exactly this point, I think the best people to run schools are the heads and the teachers and the governors. And actually the unions, the conversations have up and down the country with teachers and heads say, treat us as professionals, give us our heads, we will do the best for the children. That's what we are all in this for.
The radical thing would be to make every school an academy.
Well, it would be a radical thing, but I'm not really
So
hung
why
up
not?
on radical or ideology.
No, I'm just asking, if you say they're better schools, why not make them all academies?
Because I'm interested in what works, and I want people to make this decision themselves. As a constituency member of Parliament, I have watched my local schools make those decisions to become academies, and they have done that for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's been with encouragement. Many of them actually converted. They decided on their own. And one of the most exciting conversations I had with one of my local heads, he said, we've just become an academy. He said, I now know there are lots of freedoms I've got to make this school even better. I now have to have the courage to explore all of that.
Let's talk about another area, which is free schools, because that was a kind of stuttering revolution in the first government. It didn't move nearly as fast as its proponents wanted. And I know you've got proposals for more free schools coming, but that's partly because you wouldn't let free schools make a profit, or their organisers make a profit. Michael Gove said he had an open mind about it. What's your view?
I do not have an open mind. I don't think there is a place for profit-making schools in this country.
Why not? Well, why not? I mean, if that's what gets them into the really tough areas, into the council estates, gets them leafleting parents, trying to get parents to send their children to that school, that kind of push factor. I mean, you're a party that believes in profit. What is it about schools that makes this an impossible bridge to cross?
Well, because I think it's what we want and what parents and children want in schools is great teaching, outstanding leadership, and actually we don't have an issue with people. We have more people than ever coming forward wanting to set up free schools, many in the most challenging areas, and actually that's what we've seen in terms of the free schools set up so far. 70% of them are in areas that are the most deprived, the most challenging. And so actually it's all about making sure that we've got the right people, great people, to lead these schools, and that's what we are seeing happening.
But from Lagos, in the slums of Nigeria, to Sweden, there are lots of companies running schools for profit inside a state system, and they're really working and they're really popular. Why can't we have them in Britain or in England?
Well, we were very clear on our manifesto that we do not see there is a role for profit-making schools in our education system. And I certainly know, as a returning Secretary of State, that I have 5 years in which to make a real difference to children in our education system in this country. And I want to focus, as I say, on tackling schools that aren't yet helping children to fulfil their potential, making sure there are excellent schools in all parts of the country. Let's
talk about the money, because you also promised in the manifesto you're going to protect the budgets per capita for children. Now, the number of children in schools is going to rise by, I think, about 7% during the lifetime of the new government. So that is quite a tough thing to do. And in the context of overall austerity, you have to make cuts elsewhere to allow that to happen. So where else in your budget, where are you going to make the cuts to ensure that that promise is kept?
Well, we are going to enter a spending review as a government. We are very clear, and I think one of the reasons that we are having this...
the Education Secretary, you must know where you're going to cut.
Well, we will of course be having to look at budgets, but I am very clear, and the message I've had loud and clear from schools in the course of the campaign is that there is a real squeeze on their budgets too. Issues like teachers' pensions, national insurance contributions, teachers' pay. So I want to make sure as much of our money goes to the front line as possible. That means making savings in administration department or in the overall Department for Education. That's what I'll have to do to make sure as much money goes to the front line as possible.
You're going to have to slaughter your civil servants. I mean, not literally, obviously, but in terms of their job numbers, to abide by those promises, aren't you? Because I know all the things that you're going to protect. I still don't understand the things you're not going to protect.
Well, and that's why we're going to have a spending review looking at the overall government spending, making sure that obviously, as you say, we've protected the schools budget, but there are other very important parts of my budget as well, the FE, the 16 to 19 sector, and of course early as well. But I think, again, the message from the op-ed today should be that this government and the Prime Minister take education incredibly seriously. The reason we have a schools bill in the first Queen's speech is because education is a priority for us.
How are you going to force new schools into the toughest areas? If you're not going to allow profits, how are you going to get those new free schools or possibly academies into the really, really tough areas where lots and lots of children are being failed at the moment?
Well, as I say, we already see lots of people coming forward want to set up free schools, often and in fact mostly in very challenging environments. And one thing, again, I've learnt in the education system over the course of the last 10 months is that people like a challenge. They know, they can see the areas where education most needs to be turned around, where children need to have the best education. And so actually that's not an issue, but it's an issue about obviously the DFE offering support to those setting up those schools as well.
Now, we all watched this rather extraordinary reshuffle. We watched you going in one after another to Downing Street and coming back with the same jobs. What did David Cameron say? Did he say this is not really a reshuffle? I want you all to stay because you haven't been in the job for long enough? What did he tell you?
Well, one of the things that people said to me during the campaign, and I think one of the reasons that we did get that majority, was that people could see that we had made a real difference in the course of the last 5 years, but as part of a coalition. They wanted actually continuity. They wanted us to build on the economic reforms, and things like school reform certainly got mentioned.
So this is not a big radical break. This is continuity with previous government.
Well, I think the first thing, well, I think it does have a different tone because, of course, it's a majority Conservative government. The first thing people can be assured of is that we are going to implement the manifesto. That's different from being in a coalition. We're not spending weeks in negotiation. We are, as a government. You've heard the announcements
Perhaps slightly
this week.
to your surprise.
Well,
you have to do all of this now.
No, because actually, I have to say, as a member of Parliament or a campaigning parliamentary candidate, I was very clear that actually the polls felt very different from what was happening on the ground. It's a great pleasure to be back as Education Secretary. Very, very exciting.
Nicky Morgan, thanks for coming in to talk to us. For now, thank you very much. Over to Sian for the news headlines. Well, Nicky Morgan is still with me, and we've been joined again by Andy Burnham. Andy, one of the things that you were talking about a little while ago was free schools. You remain an opponent of free schools. Why?
Well, I like Nicky. She's a marked improvement on her predecessor, in my view, and she's right not to tolerate underperformance in schools because kids only get one go at it. But I don't think free schools are the answer. Unqualified teachers, they're like an experiment with children's education. You can't experiment with education. My approach will be to rethink comprehensive education because that, I think, is better for everyone.
Well, the trouble with that, Andy, is that you have given supportive statements as a local Member of Parliament to both the Everton School and also I think it's to the Atherton Community School.
I have.
So actually, this is the trouble with the Labour Party, which is that there's one rule for you locally and there's one rule for everybody else nationally. And actually, if you say you want to be on the side of giving children the best start in life, I would challenge you, obviously, to support your local free schools.
But I would just explain that once you've got a school, Nicky, in your community, you can't say, oh, I'm not going to deal with that school. You have to support it. But Absolutely. I still don't think the policy is right. You're spending money in areas where there's surplus places. It just does not make sense.
Very briefly, Nicky Morgan, the election campaign is now over. You can give some genuinely honest and frank advice for the potential new leader of the Labour Party. What would you do if you were him?
Oh, gosh, well, I'm not sure that Andy needs any advice. I mean, I think, we talked, and I think lots of times in the Prime Minister's questions about things like weaponising the NHS and the economic. I thought Peter Mandelson's quote about what was wrong with the Labour campaign, it was lacking in economic policy. So I think there's lots of challenges for Andy and fellow leadership candidates to come up with that.
He's grimacing.
I listened. No, I'm facing up to some of those big challenges, as you may have heard this morning.
Thank you both very much indeed. That's all we've got time for this